Yo, what's up? This is Giorgio Martini from Noise King. In this video, we're going to show you how to create a snare from scratch using Ableton Live's operator. So, what are the main parts of a synthesized snare? Basically, we have two parts. One part is a sine wave or a pitched sine wave, something really similar actually to a kick. And on the other hand, we have white noise or some really noisy type of sound. Afterwards, we would mix these two sounds together and then we would EQ them to keep most of the mid parts because we don't want so much of the lower end and so much of the high frequencies. So we would EQ them or filter them to keep the mostly like the mid frequencies, and afterwards we would add some distortion, some saturation, or even some beat crashing. Okay, so let's jump into Ableton Live and create a couple of snares. So over here I have a kick and a hi-hat, so let's see how that sounds. And so let's create a new operator. So we go ahead and we drag it over here. Let's rename it to snare. And let's add some notes. So for that, we double click over here in an empty part. And let's put it on C2. And let's see how that sounds. Okay, doesn't sound too much like a snare, but let's try to get there. All right, so what we need is to have two lanes of sound. So we, as I said before, we need one sine wave and one noise wave. The sine wave is what is going to give it this type of like punchiness. The noise is going to give it this more percussive sound probably. So for that, we need to tell the operator or any other synth that you are using to use two lanes of sound or to have two independent sources of sound. So in the operator, if we go to this part over here, which is the global shell, here we have all the algorithms that we can use. So if we go ahead and we select this one, we can use the oscillator A and oscillator C as two independent lanes of sound. So now that we got that, we can now change the source of the sound. So oscillator A has a sine wave, which is fine and is what we want, but oscillator C still has a sine wave and we want a noise. So for that, we just select an oscillator C and then we change the type of the source of sound to white noise, okay? Another thing that we're going to do is that we're going to change the amplitude envelope of oscillator A. So over here, we have the type of loop mode, and we want to change it to trigger so that as soon as the note is pressed, the envelope is triggered. So it just happens once as soon as the note is pressed, right? We also want to change the amplitude envelope because right now it's, let's see how that sounds. So you see, it's sounding, this part is sounding, and then it comes the decay. And we don't want that. We want something a little bit more natural. So for that, we're going to decrease the sustain all the way down. And maybe, let's see how that sounds. That sounds pretty good. Let's now turn the level of oscillator C a little bit higher and see how that sounds. That sounds good, but the thing is, if I would may have a long note, the noise would play as long as the note is played. So let's see how that sounds. Which can be cool for some instruments or for some snares, but in this case, we just want a regular snare that as soon as there is a note, it's triggered, right? So for that, we're going to also change the loop mode. We're not going to change it because what we want to do here is that the noise is really like sustained and it's not so like the oscillator A, which is really like smooth. So it's like, and it really fades out quite quickly. With the oscillator C, which is the noise, what we want is that it's a more electronic type of sound, so that you have a more type of sound. So for that, what we can do is we can let it to, we can actually move it to trigger, and let's change the release a little bit and the decay, and let's see how that sounds. So it's more sustained, but it's still short. You see? So if I make this longer, the sound, of course, is going to last longer. And if I make it shorter, it's going to be shorter. Something like that is fine. All right, so we already have the base of our synthesized snare. We have the pitch and we have the noise. There is still one problem because I said the pitch, I meant the sine wave. The sine wave it still needs the pitch envelope. So for that, we go over here and we turn the pitch envelope all the way up. First we turn it on, then we turn the pitch envelope all the way up. We also set the loop mode of the pitch envelope to trigger, so that it's as soon as the note is pressed, the pitch envelope is also triggered. And we're going to change the initial and the peak to 24 semitones. All right, so we click over there, we enter the note, and we press enter. So let's see how this sounds. Sounds okay, but actually it's too high. So another way that we can change the pitch of the note, instead of going over here and changing it in the piano roll, is that we can actually transpose the operator. So for that, I'm going to make minus 12 semitones over here. And we're very close to what we want, but the pitch envelope is a little bit, is not there yet. So let's play with the decay setting of the pitch envelope while it's playing until we get a setting that we like. So something like this is fine because it's what is giving it this, like this type of punchiness, right? And if we add now the noise, it sounds a little bit more like a snare. We can also add a little bit of release. And you're going to notice that if the level of oscillator C and A are more or less the same, so meaning that the sine wave and the noise are more or less at the same level, the snare is pretty flat. But the more pitch we have, it's going to sound a little bit more punchier, more with more body. So let's take a look at that. For example, like this. It's got a little bit more body. If I turn it almost all the way up, it's pretty flat. It's almost white noise. So you have to find the balance between something like this and something like this. Let's leave it like in the middle for now. And let's see how that sounds in the mix. And so we have already the basis of our sound. We have our sine wave, pitched sine wave, and the noise. Next up, we need to add some EQing to keep most of the mid frequencies, remove some of the very low ones and some of the very high ones. Okay, we could use an equalizer at the end of the chain, but for now let's stick to the filter. So the built-in filter in operator. So for that, let's go ahead and let's change the filter type. Instead of being a low pass, to be a band pass. And we're going to move the frequency a little bit lower. Otherwise, all the frequencies are going to be cut and we are not going to hear anything. So let's see how that sounds. All right, and so we see here we have actually by default is the 24 decibels type of filter is chosen. And if we go over here to this part, we can see it's cutting all of the low frequencies and and almost all of the high frequencies, if not all. But if we choose the 12 dB filter, it's actually not that hard, and it lets pass more of the low ones and more of the high ones. So let's see how that sounds. So it's actually a little bit more full, the sound. And let's just play a little bit with the filter. And as you can see, somewhere around here is something that I like in this case. So we're going to stick with this for now. And next up, we already have filtered out or EQ'd our snare. Next up, what we can do to make it a little bit more punchy and more full and more punchy is to add some distortion. Again, we could use an external or external effect at the end of the chain, like one overdrive from Ableton or whatever. But for now, let's stick to the built-in ones in Operator. So if you go over here to the filter section, we have over here a shaper, and we can choose between soft, hard, sine, or 4-bit. Let's try to see and let's try and see how the hard one sounds. And let's maybe play a little bit with the decay, with the release. And maybe play with the level of the noise. And let's play with the shaper drive and see how that sounds. Let's try and see how other types of distortion sound, like for example, 4-bit is some type of beat reducer. So let's see how that sounds. And one really cool thing with the operators is that we have this time parameter. So we can time stretch all the parameters without having to move them individually. So let's see how that sounds. And let's change the filter for now. So So as you can see, it's a matter of playing and until you get something that you like. Another thing that I can do is maybe I don't like this setting of the envelope, but I can just change it and make it like more natural in a way. And let's see how that sounds. And add maybe some distortion. More distortion even. and change the filter. But as you can see, if we have a more sustained noise, it sounds more electronic, more snappy in a way. So let's bring it back like it was. All right, so what we're going to do now is that we're going to remove the filter, which is doing the EQing and the distortion, and we're going to actually use an EQ and a distortion at the end of the chain. So for that, we go ahead and we deselect the filter, disable it, and let's see how this sounds, which is going to sound just like it was sounding in the beginning. All right, sounds good. And now we're going to add EQ. So for that, we go ahead and select Audio Effects, EQ8. And we're going to remove most of the low frequencies, and we're also going to remove most of the high frequencies, okay? So we go ahead, and for the first one, so this is the first, I don't remember the name of the thing right now, but we choose a low pass filter, a band. So this is one band, we choose a low pass filter, and let's remove a lot of the bass frequencies, because in this case, I don't want it to be fighting with our bass or with the kick, but I still want it to have some bass. Actually, in this case, it's not going to fight with the kick because the drum is not. They are not both playing at the same time. So maybe just a little bit to remove the really low frequencies. I'm also going on the band number 4. I'm going to choose a high pass filter. Is it? No, a low pass filter. Where are you? Here, and I'm going to just leave it like this so that the really high frequencies are gone. And then with the third one, or with the second one band, I'm just going to increase the frequencies that are in the middle that are interesting for me. So let's see how that sounds. Something like this. And I can also increase the bell. So I'm going to leave something like this. Let's see how it sounds before and after. So you see there is a change there. Okay, we're gonna even use this oversampling so that it's probably a little bit nicer. Okay, and now we can add a distortion. So for this sound, I really like the overdrive. So we go ahead and we drag and drop it. And let's play around with the settings. Let's play with the time. I'm going to add a little bit more interesting pattern over here. Duplicate, oh no, duplicate, but actually it's here, duplicate loop. So I'm gonna add one over here, and then yeah. So let's see. We can change the EQ over here. You can play with the time. We can even increase the phase to 25, so it gives a little bit of a click at the beginning. It's not really. So as you can see, by playing with all these settings, with the EQing, the distortion, the time, we can create different types of snares. Some are more punchy, some are less punchy. So like with this technique, we can basically create almost any kind of snare. Another effect that we can actually use and that sounds really cool on snares is a beat crusher. So let's go ahead and let's add a redux, which is a beat crusher. And let's put it after the overdrive, and let's start playing with the downsample parameter, and let's see how that sounds. Let's try to disable the overdrive and just play with the beat reduction. Maybe a little bit more of distortion. A little bit of release on the noise. And let's try maybe even transposing the snare a little bit more. It's a little bit too much actually. It's better like it was before. And we can make it longer. Or the decay, we can also play with it. Another thing that we can actually do is instead of using an EQ to filter, we can use directly a filter. So if we go ahead to the audio effects and we search for filter, we have here a auto filter. So let's drag and drop it over here and let's change the filter to bandpass, okay? And as you can see, it's the same thing as before. The bandpass is set to 24, and this is too strong and is actually letting very few of the mid frequencies pass through. And if we change it to 12, it's going to be a little bit more full the sound. So let's see how that sounds. So there you have it. Now you can create your very own snare from scratch using Ableton Live's operator and some extra effects. So thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Subscribe if you haven't, and see you next time. Peace.